Evel Knievel broke 433 bones in his career. 433. That is not a typo. That is not an exaggeration. That is a number verified by doctors, by hospitals, by X-rays stacked so high they could fill a filing cabinet. He jumped over buses, over fountains, over canyons. He crashed into concrete at 70 miles per hour. He was in a coma twice. He was pronounced clinically dead once and came back. Evel Knievel was not afraid of anything. That is not a figure of speech. That is not marketing. People who knew him, who traveled with him, who stood beside him at the edge of a ramp while 60,000 people screamed, said the man literally did not experience fear the way other human beings experienced it. And in the summer of 1971, at an outdoor event in California, Bruce Lee said one sentence to him. One sentence. And Evel Knievel, the man who did not feel fear, grabbed Bruce Lee by the arm, pulled him away from the crowd, and talked to him privately for 3 hours. When they were done, Knievel walked back to his crew. His face was different. Not shaken. Not upset. Something else. His road manager, a man who had been with him for 6 years and thought he knew every version of Evel Knievel that existed, said he had never seen that expression before. He said Knievel looked like a man who had just discovered a room in his own house that he never knew was there. To understand what Bruce Lee said, and why it hit Evel Knievel the way it did, you need to understand something about Knievel that the public image has completely buried. The public image is simple. Red, white, and blue jumpsuit. Cape. Motorcycle. A madman who risked his life for applause. A daredevil. A showman. A man who was either the bravest or the most reckless person who ever lived, depending on who you asked. That image is not wrong. But it is dangerously incomplete. Because Evel Knievel was not stupid. He was one of the most calculating risk-takers in history. He studied physics. He understood trajectory, velocity, wind resistance. He knew, before he sat on that motorcycle, exactly how fast it needed to go, exactly what angle would carry him over the obstacle and what angle would kill him. The margin was thin. Sometimes a few miles per hour. And Knievel operated inside that margin with a precision that most people never saw because they were too distracted by the spectacle. He was not a man who closed his eyes and hoped for the best. He was a man who opened his eyes wider than anyone else, calculated survival down to the decimal point, and then twisted the throttle. That is the part nobody talks about. The math. The cold, clear thinking before the crowd saw the cape and the roar of the engine. And that connects him to Bruce Lee. Because Bruce Lee did the exact same thing. In a completely different arena. With the exact same precision. The event was a charity exhibition. Outdoor venue. Southern California. Knievel was there to jump, for cars, nothing record-breaking. The kind of job that paid well and kept his name in the papers. Bruce Lee was there because he had been invited by the organizer. A social appearance. The kind of thing he usually avoided but occasionally accepted when the cause was right. They had never met. They knew of each other the way famous people in early 1970s Southern California knew of each other, through the invisible network of names that floated through certain rooms. Two men. Same event. No history. No reason to believe that 3 hours later they would be sitting together having a conversation that would change how both of them understood what they did for a living. If you love Bruce Lee stories, subscribe. I post rare stories every day. Knievel jumped first. The crowd was big, a few thousand people, pressed against barriers, cameras out, children on father's shoulders. The energy was the energy that always surrounded Knievel. Part carnival. Part execution. The intoxicating tension of watching a man do something that could kill him while wearing a costume that suggested he thought it was fun. He made the jump cleanly. Landed well. The crowd went wild. Knievel did his usual post-jump routine, waving, smiling, accepting the roar the way a man accepts sunlight. Natural. Expected. Earned. Bruce Lee was standing near the back of the crowd. He had watched the entire thing. And when Knievel climbed off the motorcycle and began walking through the crowd toward the staging area, Bruce Lee was standing along the route, not seeking him out, not trying to get his attention, just standing there, watching him pass. Their eyes met for a moment. And Bruce Lee said one sentence. He said it quietly. Not to the crowd. Not for anyone else to hear. Just to Knievel, as the man walked past, still wearing the cape, still carrying the helmet, still buzzing with the particular electricity that follows a successful jump. He said. You are more afraid than you think you are. Knievel stopped walking. Now. I need you to feel the weight of what just happened. A stranger, a small man in plain clothes standing at the edge of a crowd, has just told Evel Knievel that he is afraid. Evel Knievel. The man who jumped the fountains at Caesar's palace and crashed so badly the doctors didn't think he would ever walk again. The man who got up, healed, and jumped again. And again. And again. For years. Decades. Through injuries that would have made most people permanently retired to a couch. This man has just been told by a complete stranger that he is more afraid than he thinks. In any other circumstance, from any other person, Knievel would have laughed. Or ignored it. Or said something sharp and walked away. He did not laugh. He did not walk away. He stopped. He turned. He looked at Bruce Lee. And what he saw in Bruce Lee's face was not mockery. Not challenge. Not the smugness of a man trying to provoke a reaction. What he saw was understanding. The expression of someone who recognized something. Who had seen something in the way Knievel moved, in the way he carried himself, in the subtle architecture of his body language, that most people could not see. Something that Knievel himself had buried so deep that he had forgotten it was there. Knievel looked at Bruce Lee for a long moment. Then he said. Who are you? Bruce Lee told him his name. Knievel said. Come with me. They sat in the cab of Knievel's truck. Windows down. California sun coming through the glass. The noise of the crowd still audible in the distance but far enough away to feel like another world. Knievel put the helmet on the dashboard. He unzipped the top of his jumpsuit. He looked at Bruce Lee and said. Explain. Bruce Lee did not rush. He said. I watched you before the jump. Not the jump itself. Before. The last 90 seconds before you started the engine. Knievel said. What did you see? Bruce Lee said. I saw a man managing his fear. Very skillfully. Better than almost anyone I have ever seen. You have a system. You breathe a certain way. You fix your eyes on a certain point. You create a sequence of physical actions that override the emotional response. It is extremely sophisticated. Most people would never notice it. Knievel was very still. Bruce Lee continued. But the fear is there. Underneath the system. And here is the thing, I don't think you know it is still there. I think you have managed it so well, for so long, that you have confused managing it with eliminating it. You believe you are not afraid. But you are. You are deeply afraid. And the fact that you do not know it is the most dangerous part. The truck was silent. Outside, someone was testing a speaker system. A child was laughing. The world was carrying on the way it always does while something private and enormous is happening in a truck cab 30 feet away. Knievel looked down at his hands. And then he said something that he had never said out loud before. He said. I know. 2 words. From a man who had built his entire public identity, his brand, his income, his legend, on the premise that he was fearless. I know. The conversation that followed lasted almost 3 hours. And what it turned into was something that neither man expected. Because Bruce Lee did not lecture Knievel about fear. He did not offer advice. He did not do the thing that most people do when someone opens a door, rush through it with opinions and solutions and well-meaning noise. He shared his own. He told Knievel about his fear. Not a theoretical fear. Not a philosophy lesson. His actual, lived, daily fear. He told him that every time he stepped in front of a camera, there was a voice inside him that said, "They will see through you. They will realize you are pretending. They will figure out that you are not the legend they think you are just a man from Hong Kong who got lucky." He told him that every time he took on a new student, he was terrified that he would teach them something wrong. That they would go into a fight trusting what he had given them and it would fail and they would be hurt because of him. He told him that his deepest fear, the one that lived underneath all the others, the one that he had never fully spoken out loud before, was that he would run out of time. That there was something enormous inside him. Something he had been building toward his entire life. Something he could feel the shape of but could not quite see yet. And that he would die before he got there. He said, "Every morning I train as if I am running out of time. Because I am. And I do not know when it stops." Knievel listened. For a man who had spent his career performing, always managing the image, always being the fearless daredevil, listening to another man be this honest about fear was like breathing oxygen for the first time after years of breathing something slightly thinner. He didn't know what to call it at first. Then he did. Relief. The relief of sitting across from someone who understood that courage is not the absence of fear. That the people who pretend they are not afraid are not braver than everyone else. They are just lonelier. If you love Bruce Lee stories, subscribe. I post rare stories every day. Knievel told Bruce Lee things in that truck that he had never told anyone. He talked about the nightmares. The ones that came the night before a jump. The ones where he saw the crash happen in slow motion, the bike failing, the angle wrong, the impact, the hospital, the tubes, and woke up soaked in sweat with his heart hammering and his hands shaking. He said he had those nightmares before every single jump. Every single one. For years. And every morning after, he stood up, put on the jumpsuit, walked to the motorcycle, and did it anyway. While smiling. While waving. While acting like the most relaxed man on earth. He said, "Nobody knows that about me. Nobody." Bruce Lee said, "I know. Because I do the same thing." And in that moment, in the cab of a truck in a parking lot in California, two men who the world believed were fearless sat together and told each other the truth. The truth that fear never goes away. That it is not supposed to go away. That the people who claim they have conquered it have only learned to perform its absence. And that the real work, the work that makes a person genuinely dangerous, genuinely alive, genuinely free, is not the elimination of fear. It is the refusal to let fear choose your actions. They climbed out of the truck as the sun was getting low. 3 hours. Gone like 20 minutes. They shook hands. Not the handshake of celebrities at an event. The handshake of two men who had just been more honest with each other than they had been with anyone in years. Knievel said, "I am not going to tell anyone about this conversation." Bruce Lee said, "Neither am I." And they didn't. Knievel went back to his crew. His road manager, the one who noticed the expression on his face, asked him what happened. Knievel said, "Nothing. Just talked." But his road manager knew him. 6 years on the road together. And he said that in the weeks that followed, something was different. Knievel still jumped. He still wore the cape. He still smiled and waved and played the part. But the road manager said there was a new quality to it. A softness underneath the bravado that had not been there before. As if Knievel had been given permission, by someone who understood, to carry the fear instead of pretending it didn't exist. He said. It was like watching a man put down a weight he had been holding so long he forgot his arms were tired. Knievel never publicly mentioned Bruce Lee. Not in interviews. Not in his autobiography. Not in any of the hundreds of stories he told about his life. But years later, long after Bruce Lee had died, Knievel was at a dinner with close friends. The conversation turned to bravery, to risk, to what makes a person do dangerous things. And Knievel, old now, tired, carrying 433 broken bones, said something that silenced the table. He said. The bravest man I ever met was a martial artist who weighed 135 pounds. And he was the bravest because he was the only man I ever knew who admitted he was afraid and did it anyway without pretending he wasn't. Someone asked who. Knievel picked up his glass. Took a long drink. Set it down. He said. Bruce Lee. And he never mentioned it again. Here is what this story is really about. It is not about bravery. It is not about motorcycles or martial arts or jumping over cars. It is about the loneliest thing in the world. The loneliness of being afraid while everyone around you believes you are not. Bruce Lee felt it. Evel Knievel felt it. And on one afternoon, for 3 hours, they put it down together. That is the rarest thing two human beings can do. Not perform for each other. Not compete with each other. Not impress each other with the things they are willing to do despite the danger. But to sit across from each other and say, I am terrified. Every day. And I do it anyway. And I have never told anyone that before. Bruce Lee was 32 when he died. Evel Knievel was 69 when he died. Neither man ever spoke about that afternoon. But both men lived differently after it. And if you listen closely, if you watch the footage from Knievel's jumps in the years that followed, and the films Bruce Lee made in his final 2 years, you can see it. Something softer underneath the power. Something more honest underneath the spectacle. Between two men who were afraid. And were brave enough to say so.